Okay, we're back. So, all right, let's my continuing to go through Iago here. I feel like nobody's watching these videos, and I feel a little crazy for making them, but I also feel like it's my job. I feel like I gotta have the video, I gotta create the videos here, and then anybody that shows up can find them. But I am a little worried about. I'm looking at the number of views in these videos, and I feel like a crazy person. I'm just making videos in the backyard that I don't think anybody is watching these. It's just me being insane. I'm even dressing up. Look, I fucking dressed up today. I look fucking great. All right, so let's keep going with Iago. So this is the scene where the fancy party is going on up above in Cyprus, and down below, Iago and Rodrigo and the lower class men are kind of having a more dirty party. Iago's doing Othello's doing that kind of fancy dancing where he touches palms with his wife and they spin around in circles and do this kind of thing. And Iago's like down below where people are just like fucking in public. Um, and Iago is speaking to Rodrigo. And what Iago says here, he says, first I must tell you this, Desdemona is directly in love with him, right? He's talking about Cassio. Um, so he says, first of all, I know you're upset that she's married to Othello, but the real secret is that she's in love with Cassio. This is not true. Iago's just spreading lies. And Rodrigo can't believe it because he worships Desdemona and thinks she's perfectly. She says, with him it is not possible. And he says, lay thy finger thus and let thy soul be instructed. And by the way, we lay thy finger thus. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. We got a pretty good guess, though. It means lay thy finger thus. Right? Put your finger to your lips. Nobody knows for sure, by the way, what Shakespeare wanted the actor to do there. But it's a pretty good guess that he wanted them to kind of, be quiet while I tell you this. So he says, lay thy finger thus and let thy soul be instructed. Mark me, meaning notice, with what violence she first loved the more, but for bragging and telling her fantastical lies. Now that's, you see the irony? He says that she fell in love with Othello because he told her lies. He didn't tell her lies. Iago's the one telling the lies. Right now, that's irony. Um, he says, mark the violence, meaning the suddenness. Pay attention to the suddenness that she first loved the more, that's Othello, but for bragging and telling her fantastical lies. And will she love him still for prating? That's talking, right? You think she's still going to be in love with him if he keeps talking and talking? He says, let not thy discreet heart think it. Her eye must be fed, and what delight shall she have to look upon the devil? Once again, Iago compares Othello with his black skin to the devil, frequently thought of as dark. Um, and he says, listen, she may have fallen in love with him suddenly because he told her all these crazy stories about traveling all over the world, but fundamentally she's going to want somebody good looking, and Othello can't be good looking, says Iago, because he's black. And again, he's playing on the stereotypes that were common at the time. He says that she was going to want somebody better looking, meaning she's going to want somebody white, and that's why she's in love with Cassio. And of course, Iago's telling him this because he wants to set Cassio and Rodrigo against each other so he can get Cassio out of the way, because Cassio got the job that he wanted, and this is part of his larger plan to kind of destroy everything. He says, all right, her eye must be fed. Again, there's a metaphor there comparing the eye to a mouth that wants sort of delicious things. And what delight shall she have to look upon the devil? When the blood, that's like hormones, when the blood is made dull with the act of sport, meaning, and you notice Iago, by the way, describes sex as an act of sport. When the blood is made dull with the act of sport, and again, it's a metaphor, right? Active sport is a metaphor for sex. Why? Because it's just something physical you do for fun. Because Iago, of course, can't grasp that love might be involved in any way. He thinks love is nonsense. It's just sport. It's just something you do for fun, like athletes would do. Her eye must be fed, and what delight shall she have to look upon the devil? When the blood is made dull with the act of sport, right? Once her hormones calm down after having sex enough. There should be, again, to inflame it and give satiety, a fresh appetite, a loveliness and favor, a sympathy in years, manners, and beauties, all which the Moor is defective in, right? Once her hormones calm down, she's going to want somebody young like her, white like her. Now, for want of these required conveniences, her delicate tenderness will find itself abused, begin to heave the gorge, meaning she's going to feel vomity at being with somebody that's not good looking, disrelish and abhor them more. So she's going to get sick of them. Very nature will instruct her in it and compel her to some second choice, right? She can't possibly stay with Othello. Nobody would stay with a black guy, says Iago. She's got to go to somebody else. Now, sir, this granted, as it is a most pregnant and unforced position. Pregnant just means, like, full of meaning. It is the most pregnant and unforced position. Who stands so eminent in the degree of this fortune as Cassio does, right? Cassio's the perfect person for her to go to, because he's young, and he's white, and he's good-looking. A knave very voluble, where he talks a lot. Knave means idiot. No further conscionable than putting on the mere form of civil and humane seeming for the better compassing of his salt and most hidden loose affection. That Cassio just pretends to be polite in public, but really, him and Desdemona are going to have sex. Why none, a slipper and a subtle knave, a finder out of occasions, that has an eye that can stamp and counterfeit advantages, though the true advantage never presents itself, right? He's tricky, he's sneaky, he can find a way, a devilish knave, right? He's a bad guy. Besides, the knave is handsome, young, and hath all those requisites in him that folly and green minds look after. Green minds, by the way, is another metaphor. Green there comes from plants, right? A green plant is young. When the leaves turn brown, they're old, they fall off, they die. So he has a green mind, meaning he has a young mind. Simple metaphors. Um, he has a green mind to look after. A pestilent, complete knave, and the woman hath found him already. Notice, by the way, what Iago does. He works in big stereotypes. He doesn't say, like, I have evidence that her and Cassio were having sex. He doesn't say, I have evidence that she doesn't like Othello, because he could make up all kinds of evidence. What Iago does is he works not with individuals, but with broad stereotypes. So instead of saying things like, oh, I think Desdemona is sick of Othello, he says, I think a young white girl like that is going to get sick of this old black guy pretty fast. Instead of saying, I think Desdemona, she really seems like she's into Cassio, he says, I think somebody young and white like that and good looking, is gonna want somebody who's also young and white and good looking. Cassio is the obvious choice. He deals in big, broad stereotypes. This is how he thinks. It's part of sort of his scheme. So one of the things that Othello is about in terms of ideas, right? Remember, one of the things we're looking for is ideas. One of the things Othello is about is ideas. It's about stereotypes and the damaging things that they do. Because when you get a stereotype in place, like people from Venice are super sneaky, or black people are violent, and then it allows people to go, oh yeah, I've heard that before, that must be true. It's a way of sort of getting into their heads, into their psychology, and manipulating people. Because once people believe in stereotypes, you can then use those stereotypes against them, right? If you convince enough people that all Muslims are terrorists, then it's very easy to get them to pick on one Muslim person, even though that person's probably not a terrorist. Very few Muslims are terrorists. That's a crazy thing to say. Very few human beings are terrorists. but if people have a stereotype that Muslim equals terrorist, it's going to allow you to convince somebody that this one guy that you hate is a terrorist because they have the kind of stereotype. There is, by the way, a larger conversation that's probably more complicated than I want to do right now about whether all stereotypes are fundamentally metaphors. I think they probably are, but we'd have to think about that more. But this idea of like, because they apply to a large number of people, it's like a category. It's all white people, all black people, all Chinese people. It functions as a metaphor. It's not looking at the individual people in that group. It's just like a larger idea about the whole group as a whole, and it's largely metaphorical, right? This idea that I don't know, the black people are like animals is a metaphor that is also a stereotype, and so it's worth pointing out that it's a powered metaphor. You think metaphors are some cute little things that show up in poetry, but they're not. They're part of the racist imagination of America, and a big part of the way that sort of America moves and does things. So let's jump back in here. Actually, I think I'm going to end this video and I'll pick it up in the next one.